Barcelona arrive at the Riyadh Air Metropolitano facing a brutal mathematical reality. They are down 2-0 in a Champions League quarterfinal. Erasing a multi-goal deficit requires prolonged, suffocating possession in the final third. But committing those numbers forward forces the defensive line to push dangerously high up the pitch. This diagram illustrates the trap. On the left, the 2-0 aggregate scoreline dictates Barcelona's urgency. On the right, we see the resulting high average defensive line required to sustain pressure. When that high line is exposed, Atletico's rested front line is primed to exploit it. Antoine Griezmann only needs one touch to launch a vertical transition, hitting Julian Alvarez in stride and bypassing Barcelona's defense entirely. There is recent precedent for a turnaround. Hansi Flick's squad has already completed 10 comebacks across all competitions this season. The European data, however, tells a different story. The club has overturned a deficit of 2 or more goals in knockout ties on only 5 occasions, and every single one of those occurred at home. Adding to the psychological friction is the appointment of French referee Clement Turpin. His previous knockout stage assignments for the club have correlated with European exits, including the 2018 collapse in Rome. Flick must attempt this high-wire act without his primary ball-playing center-back. Pau Cubarsí is suspended following his first leg red card, leaving a structural void in the exact zone Atletico wants to target. Flick argues that his squad is capable of the perfect game required to nullify Atletico's advantage. Overturning this deficit means solving a complex systems engineering problem. It requires precise, interconnected adjustments across the midfield, defense, and attack to score without conceding. The foundation of this comeback will be built in the center of the pitch. To construct a stable base, Flick is expected to deploy a double pivot featuring Pedri, alongside the returning Frenkie de Jong. De Jong's recovery from a hamstring injury provides the structural integrity the team lacked in the first leg. He is the focal point for maintaining possession under duress. Looking at the middle third, the Pedri and de Jong pivot operates against Atletico's block. Against a deep defense, the best preventative measure is flawless ball retention. Circulating the ball safely between the pivot and flanks prevents the chaotic turnovers Simeone's system relies on. If you starve Atletico of those sudden transition states, you neutralize their ability to generate counter-attacking momentum. We saw the physical viability of this demanding midfield workload this past weekend, with Pedri completing a full 90 minutes. For Barcelona, defending the counterattack begins entirely by refusing to give Atletico the transition moments they crave. Moving to the defensive third, the tactical void left by Cubarsí's suspension requires immediate attention. The burden of managing the Highline's timing falls to a reshuffled pairing, anchored by the physical intensity of Ronald Araujo alongside Eric Garcia. This specific pairing must drastically alter their drop-off timing to compensate for Julian Alvarez's raw pace. This animation shows the transition moment Atletico wants. Regaining possession deep, Antoine Griezmann drops into the half space between Barcelona's midfield and defense. Receiving the ball here, his threat is immediate, turning to hit Alvarez with a vertical pass behind the high line. To neutralize this passing lane, Eric Garcia steps up from center-back as the midfield pivot drops back, converging to compress the pocket. This spatial compression denies Griezmann the half-second needed to face forward, forcing a lateral pass and resetting the attack. This is spatial geometry acting as the primary mechanism for modern transition defense. Nullifying an elite playmaker like Griezmann is achieved by mathematically shrinking the zones he is allowed to operate within. In the final third, Flick faces his most critical personnel decision, selecting who leads the attacking line. The choice between Robert Lewandowski and Ferran Torres dictates the entire geometry of the pitch. This board shows the first option. Lewandowski acts as a static focal point, pinning 2 Atletico center-backs deep inside their penalty box. His central gravity pulls the defense inward, opening up isolated one-on-one space on the flanks for Yamal and Rashford. Toggling to the second option, we see the shape with Ferran Torres. Positioning himself slightly deeper, he sprints to initiate a high press against Atletico's build-up. His pressing vector acts as a kinetic trigger, dragging the Barcelona defensive line higher, squeezing Atletico. Torres, coming off a domestic brace, provides the fresh legs and kinetic energy required to compress the pitch over long stretches. The trade-offs are incredibly steep. Starting Lewandowski forces the wingers to expend massive energy carrying the high press, while starting Torres sacrifices elite clinical finishing on a night where 2 goals are required. The solution to this dilemma lies in tactical sequencing. The optimal strategy is to deploy Torres from the opening whistle to exhaust Atletico with high-energy pressing, reserving Lewandowski's elite penalty box movement to exploit a fatigued low block in the final stages. Zooming out, we can evaluate Hansi Flick's completed tactical blueprint for the second leg. This diagram lays out the projected starting 11: Joan Garcia in goal, Koundé, Araujo, Eric Garcia, and Cancelo across the back, Pedri and De Jong in the pivot, with Yamal, Fermin Lopez, and Rashford supporting Torres up front. This specific system relies on strict interdependence. De Jong's ball retention protects the high line. The high line compresses space to choke out transitions, and Torres triggers the aggressive press. The viability of this exact system is proven by recent domestic data, notably Barcelona's 3-0 Copa del Rey victory and a 4-2 La Liga win over Diego Simeone's squad. The first leg defeat extracted a heavy emotional toll, with young players like Lamine Yamal visibly shaken on the pitch. However, that dressing room frustration provides the exact fuel necessary to sustain a high-intensity pressing blueprint for 90 minutes. Overcoming a 2-0 deficit away from home defies historical precedent, but the precise tactical mechanisms required to execute this remontada are fully within Hansi Flick's systemic control.